as the campaign season enters the final stretch. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Melissa Francis, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, former director of strategic communications for the Hillary Clinton campaign, Adrian Elrod, and in the center seat today, editor-in-chief of Campus Reform, Lawrence Jones, and he is outnumbered. Great to see you.
Thank you for having me, ladies.
Absolutely.
Crazy news day.
It isn't a busy one. Let's get to it.
All right.
A new survey from the nonpartisan Public Religion Research Institute shows Democrats with a 9-point advantage on the generic ballot. As they try to make gains in Congress, Democrats are looking to have a chance in the House, but the Senate appears to be slipping away from their grasp. The survey found that more than half of Americans say they are absolutely certain to vote in the midterms, with just more than a quarter putting their odds of voting at 50-50. 19% say they will probably vote. And it appears partisans are about as equally likely to report that they will vote. 63% of Democrats and 59% of Republicans say they are absolutely certain to turn out next Tuesday. Intensity and voter count will matter, but early voting, Lawrence, has been going on in many places, and we've been watching that as well.
Yeah, I think there's some good on both sides that they can apply. For Democrats, are probably upset because the voter registration numbers are up, which normally benefits the Democrat. But also Republicans are excited because after the Kavanaugh, there was really this momentum. And now you have the caravan coming across, which also is going to excite Republican voters as well. I think we pretty much know that the Republicans are going to keep the Senate. I still don't know where the House is going to go. And I think anybody that suggests that they know right now is kind of being intellectually dishonest.
And when you say that, caravan being an excitement point for the electorate on the right side, you mean the issue of illegal immigration and the wall and everything that goes with that?
So we know that the president campaign was centered over immigration. And so I think Republicans constantly win that issue. But because they didn't deliver on issues like the health care, you'll get Democrats show up for that. But now, since this is so close to the midterm, I think Republicans will be going to the polls now.
You know, Adrian, if you'll allow me, I want to show a couple of things first before you and I talk, because as Lawrence has pointed out, it really is a mixed bag, right? But it isn't just on how you see it, it's who's voting. So let's look at Republicans on suburban women, if we can, right now. And do we have that? Okay, maybe not. All right. Okay, so a full screen graphic that says problems right now. This is from Jason Rowe, a Republican consultant, taking a look at that. Problems right now are with suburban women, and these developments, there it is, in the last week affect them more than other demographic groups. It is important for us to get them focused back on the key issues, the economy and immigration. Now let's go to the Democrat response on this, and that comes from Chris Coffin, who says, we haven't had a real message since the last presidential election, so why change it now? We have no message in 2016. We have no message in between. We have no message going into this election. You have to give people a reason to vote for you, not just a chance to just show up and vote. Adrian?
Yeah, look, I know Chris Kofinas. He's a very well-respected Democratic strategist, but I'm going to disagree with him on here because we do have a message. First of all, it's a little bit hard as a Democrat to get your message out right now when you've got no control of the House, Senate, or the White House. But the Democrats who are on message are saying universally, we want to protect, not repeal health care. We want to raise wages, and we want to clean up the corruption in Washington. And that is the message that we're running on, and that is why you're seeing suburban women, which are the ultimate swing vote in a lot of elections, especially in 2016, now again in 2018, in droves toward Democrats. Democrats hold a 25-point generic lead among white suburban women, which is huge because we didn't have that lead in 2016. So I'm going to, again, respectfully disagree on what you said, that nobody would know, would be able to predict what's happening in the House right now. I think Democrats are well poised to take back the House. Whether this is going to be a huge blue wave, like we thought it was a couple of months ago, or whether it's just going to be a wave.
A puddle, a blue puddle.
I think, but look, we need 23 seats is a win, and that's what we need to take back the House. And I am very confident
I'm not
that
sure
we
that
are
the American people
moving in that direction.
know what you guys' message is, though. I mean, maybe the people in Washington, D.C. that are coming up with policy and legislative packets, but I haven't seen that candidate that can go out there and get the American people to get behind the agenda. You still see Donald Trump rallies packed to capacity.
I can name a lot of candidates, Lawrence, who can name why they're running and why Democrats are the right party.
So I just want to add, so at the very end of the Democrat strategist that we're talking about, he says it's more than just voting against someone.
Right.
Katie, I made the point on the air yesterday, it might not have been yesterday, but recently with the question, is this a function of the president being on the ballot? And that's why you see not only the interest, but the split. I'm wondering.
Well, although the House of Representatives is a national office, they're actually very localized issues and races. So the candidates that are chosen to run in these districts, especially the districts that President Trump took away from Barack Obama in 2016, are crucial. And we've seen that localized messages are really what matter here. And the candidates that are running simply against Donald Trump aren't doing as well. Beto O'Rourke is one of them. He hasn't necessarily focused just on Texas issues. He's tried to run against President Trump.
And we've seen that one widen, right?
We have.
With Ted Cruz and Beto.
Yeah, Ted Cruz
Beto
is running away with that race. But, for example, the Senate race in Arizona is still very tight. And these local House races, it's going to be a very close race in all of those based on what's happening in those districts. And, you know, tax reform affects certain House districts differently than it affects others. And some Republicans in states like New York and California can't necessarily run on that because it's not been good for their state. So that's a big question. One other point. I find it interesting to watch how the nuts and bolts of elections have changed in this cycle. Republicans, you know, historically don't have a good record of voter turnout. But in Florida, for example, Republican voters are doing better than Democrats. Now in Georgia, voter turnout is benefiting the Democrat running for governor there. And so seeing the shift in how Republicans kind of taken the Democrat playbook and getting early voters out to the polls is interesting to watch.
Yeah, and with Florida, of course, you've had the president talk about that race. You've seen others go down there. You just saw Will Ferrell go out for the Georgia governor's race on the Democrat side just this week. So it is interesting, some of the other people who are kind of getting involved. And I mentioned the president's name on the ballot, not in actuality, but the way that we have talked about it and the way that he talks about himself and well, not just his agenda, but his accomplishments is what he points to in terms of that actually being something that people should think about when they go into the voting booth. So it's kind of like he's there.
I think one of the things, though, that people are thinking about are the events of the last couple of days. And last night I went to an interfaith service, and the rabbi there was talking about, let's all stand as one and show our unity together. And, you know, the whole group got up and was together. And there was a feeling of sort of exhaustion, I think, you know, of the rancor and everything that has been going on. And I wonder, I hope it doesn't chill voting, but, you know, it could cause people to just kind of disengage.
And that would take it back to the base of each side, right? So, you know, people who do feel exhausted about, you know, the fighting that we've had over the past 2 years.
And the violence.
The campaigning, the violence, feeling helpless and being able to change anything. That then takes it back to voters who regularly vote on the Republican and Democratic side and goes back to the key issue of every midterm election, which is turnout of your base. And that is what the president has campaigned on. That is what national Democrats have campaigned on. And what Democrats, quite frankly, have been more energized this year of doing than Republicans have.
And so far, we are seeing turnout in record numbers for a midterm election. So that is one exciting thing.
Yeah, so I interviewed the RNC chairwoman, Ronna McDaniel, yesterday, and she said, Lawrence, that the ground game on the Republican side is very different this time around and that their door knocks and their outreach are in the millions. And she thinks that that will get people also engaged. And that's what we want. It doesn't matter which political party. We just want people engaged.
Well, that actually, you know, surprises me because from my interpretation, it seemed like a lot of the candidates were expecting the president to come in and save them. And
well,
Katie
she said to me, Ronna said, it doesn't matter what the president does if that candidate isn't handling their own business on the ground.
Local business. Get it done. Yep.
We'll move on. Funeral services are beginning today for some of the victims murdered in the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. President Trump and the First Lady also, we know, are headed to Pittsburgh later today to pay their respects. We'll be watching for that, and we'll bring that to you here on Fox News. Plus, President Trump is reportedly considering a groundbreaking move to do away with birthright citizenship. Would that be legal? We will talk about it as the migrant caravan continues moving northward toward our border. Stay close.
We have a very strong border. I called up the military. This caravan is not, they're wasting their time. They are not coming into the country.
What's the military going to...
Society. It was an act that is fundamentally at odds with who we are. The events in Pittsburgh remind us of the fragile nature of life. These events remind us that we have a responsibility to each other in guarding that fragile life.
The governor of Pennsylvania reacting to the synagogue shooting. Funerals begin today for the victims. Let's take a live look now at Pittsburgh's oldest and largest synagogue, Rodef Shalom. Inside, the funeral of brothers Cecil and David Rosenthal is right now. Those are being held. Dr. Jerry Rabinowitz also being laid to rest today. There are 3 of the 11 killed in the mass shooting from Friday being memorialized at this time. Meanwhile, President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump are set to visit Pittsburgh later today.
I'm just going to pay my respects. I'm also going to the hospital to see the officers and some of the people that were so badly hurt. And I really look forward to going. I would have done it even sooner, but I didn't want to disrupt any more than they already had disruption.
But Pittsburgh's mayor is wishing the president would wait a little longer. Matt Finn is in Pittsburgh with more. Matt?
Harris, Pittsburgh's Democratic Mayor William Peduto calls the president's visit to this city today a distraction, and the mayor says he wishes the president would not come until all the dead are buried. Pittsburgh mayor also says he has safety concerns. He feels that there are not enough safety officials in the city to accommodate both the president and all of the funerals. And Pittsburgh's mayor has already butted heads with the president over the weekend, disagreeing with the president's comments that places of worship should have armed guards to protect against these types of shootings. And here on the ground in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood, the president's visit is generating reactions of all different types. The progressive Jewish PAC Ben, the ARC, is protesting against the president's visit today and asking that the president denounce white nationalism. Here is a leader of that PAC and then some folks that we talked to here in Squirrel Hill.
I think he's probably been the most pro-Israel president we've had. However, I do think that he has not done enough to distance himself from some factions that may be on the wrong side of love.
His own daughter is Jewish, so to me it's just like, it's hard to say that somebody would purposely try to make something like this happen.
You mentioned that doctor's funeral. It's happening just a block behind us, and we are just a short distance away from the Tree of Life Synagogue here in the Squirrel Hill neighborhood. Harris.
Matt Finn, thank you very much. Melissa?
President Trump is reportedly looking at doing away with birthright citizenship through executive order as the showdown over a migrant caravan heading to the nation's southern border is heating up. But there are questions over whether the president has the authority to move the right of citizenship, remove it from babies of non-citizens and illegal immigrants born on U.S. soil. Lawmakers already responding, with Senator Lindsey Graham tweeting, "Finally, a president willing to take on this absurd policy of birthright citizenship. In addition, I plan to introduce legislation along the same lines as the proposed executive order from President Trump." In the meantime, when it comes to the migrant caravan, the president telling our Laura Ingram that asylum seekers will not be released and will instead be held in tent cities until their trials. Watch this.
We're going to build tent cities. We're going to put tents up all over the place. We're not going to build structures and spend all of this, hundreds of millions of dollars. We're going to have tents. They're going to be very nice, and they're going to wait. And if they don't get asylum, they get out.
In the meantime, the Trump administration announcing the mobilization of 1,500 troops to the southern border, calling the effort Operation Faithful Patriot, as a senior U.S. official saying an additional 2,000 troops are ready to deploy if needed. All this coming, of course, ahead of the midterms. Lawrence, let me start with you, because people out in the audience may not realize that this whole idea of birthright citizenship has been a hot legal topic
For a while.
in academia for years. Professors at Yale taking it up in a book that they wrote. There's a very long argument I was reading through in the Harvard Law Review, going back and forth about what this really means. Yeah. And the problem, I think, with the president taking this up, even though he's hardly the first person to think of it, is the idea that the history of the 14th Amendment. Yeah. And when it was ratified in 1868, related to Dred Scott, yeah. and all of its ties through history, basically, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but have to do with race relations. Yeah. So to me, it seems like a very bad idea to pick up this fight right now.
Yeah, so I come at it from two lenses. I agree with the president's frustration. I'm very upset with Congress for inaction, but at the same time, the law is the law. And so I believe the president is going to get himself in a legal battle that I think he would lose at the Supreme Court. Whether he wants to be frustrated, this is the process in America. And so when he does this before an election, yes, it will get some of the base riled up. But it's also going to get people on the left riled up because it says that the president doesn't respect the Constitution. I disagree with that. I think there are a lot of people that made the same argument as the president. But even our Judge Napolitano has said, this is very clear, people. The 14th Amendment stands. And so I think this is a bad move for the president.
I would say there's a distinction, though, with the 14th Amendment. It was put in place to put for freed slaves to become citizens of the United States, to make them equal citizens and to unify the country. So that's different than illegal immigrants coming to the country and having children and wanting them to be equal. And then, of course, that means that the parents eventually usually get to stay because we're a compassionate country and we don't want to tear our families apart and deport the parents and keep the citizen children here. That being said, this is a legal issue that the president's going to have to take on. The Supreme Court has not ruled specifically on this issue. But the broader point is there is a very serious problem with birth tourism fraud. China has an entire curriculum for families that come to California. They apply for visas under, saying they're going to work or they're just coming to visit. And then they have children here. And then essentially the entire family gets to stay. Russia's also doing this with Florida. So the issue here is really visa fraud and people coming here to have children to gain that access to the United States through a child's citizenship. That is an issue that we can take on through fraud and the FBI cracking down on those things. And earlier this year, they actually did. But the legal battle on this is going to be a tough one. Final point, President Trump campaigned on this. So this idea that this is some surprise that he's bringing up, he's very focused on fulfilling his campaign promises. He talked about this repeatedly on the campaign trail. He got elected with this in his agenda. So I'm not surprised he's bringing it up, or even now before an election.
Adrian, the issue that I think he's trying to address is the idea of what is the draw beyond the obvious. What are we doing to exacerbate the problem of people who want to come here for a better life, and so they're willing to break the law in order to do so? There might be better ways to go about it rather than...
Yeah, look, I think the timing is very suspect. He's bringing this up 7 days before the midterm elections. He's delivering red meat to his base. Simply put, he cannot overturn a constitutional amendment via an executive order. Whether or not Congress should be doing more to address the issue of immigration, I think that is a debatable topic, and I would actually agree as a Democrat that hopefully if Democrats take back the House, we can come together in a bipartisan way and actually address some of these issues. But this is just a tactic for him to deliver red meat, and I just want to remind everyone to go vote and don't let this distract you.
The problem is, though, is that you have a Democratic Party now that is increasingly going to the open borders type policies.
Right.
Okay, and so this issue they should probably sit out because it's not going to get them more support with the American people. This already was litigated, as Katie correctly noted, in the last election where the president made it the center of his campaign. He will win on this issue politically. It's just a matter of
and
course.
Democrats have been told not to talk about immigration on the campaign trail. It's not an issue that they want to touch, and the visual image of the caravan has actually helped people see it and say, that seems like a problem and not necessarily just asylum seekers coming to the country.
So I want to go back to this idea, though, of timing, because we know that in certain California districts in particular, illegal immigration and those topics that fall under it, the wall, so on and so forth, are high atop their list. In other parts of the country, it's healthcare, but usually the healthcare, the economy, national security, those things are clustered. So it's all there in the mix. But the timing of this, talk to me about that, because it now then shifts it to almost a people versus the Constitution type thing. And I watched the Axios video that came out, the interview with the president, that the parts that we've been able to see this morning, and the president making the argument that no, he does have the power in an executive order. But is that what appeals to the base, or is it the overall look at national security and the wall? I'm just curious.
Well, I think the American people, because the president hasn't been able to get that physical wall, the reason why the president
he is getting viewing it in some parts.
In
Because we
some
saw
parts,
Secretary Nielsen viewing part of it.
The president
in San
also
Diego.
wants to show for the American people that he actually did something. Of course, there was, there's funding challenges, and he got some funding of the but the American people can't see that. What they do see is the president saying, look, I'm going to pass this executive order. What they do see is him sending troops to the border. And so the president...
When the caravan, by the way, is several months away from being at the border.
But it is
Some parts of it, I mean, there are reports that it is dissipating, and so there might be some in the caravan who are more physically fit and not traveling with as many people might be able to get there. I'm just putting that out there because those are the facts this morning. I brain room the topic of the caravans too. This is certainly not the first one that we've seen. It's been kind of a nuance to illegal immigration for about a decade now.
Well, it's still
not all of it illegal. Some of the asylum requests being fulfilled.
Well, make no mistake, this is still a big issue for voters, especially Republican voters. It's the economy and immigration.
So let me ask it to you in a different way, Lawrence. So what about the idea that, okay, we know that Democrats, as you said, don't necessarily, Adrian, win on this issue. But when you put it in a way about birthright and children, and you look at how many people have come into this country and their children and their children's children have become citizens in the United States, how do you square that with where the president is right before an election? Because Democrats may they may come up with a list of people who are now suddenly citizens. I see Katie nodding at me. I
personally don't think that it's an issue.
The timing is not great.
Right, the timing is not great. But I also, to Katie's point about the history of race in America concerning this, they're going to also lose black voters when it comes to that, because black voters aren't pro illegal immigration. And black voters aren't showing up. How are they going to get them out to the polls? And immigration is not the issue to get them to show up for the Democrats.
What is the issue?
Well, it's health care. It's the economy.
It's those other issues that,
You sound like a Democrat, Lauren.
No, I know my community.
We're
I
just
used to be a
looking at
Democrat.
the facts. I mean, Katie, just back to this whole point of timing. We saw the conversation change so vividly with Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation process. So we know that there are those topics out there that can vividly change the flow of things, if you will, leading up to an election.
Did it happen
I'm
too
wondering
soon?
if birthright citizenship is one of those. I don't know. I'm just asking.
The topic may be helpful to the base, and that's the risk that they're taking. They maybe have looked at this and said this would be beneficial. It may rile up the left too, but it will rile up the right. It also just proves overall that the issue of illegal immigration is extremely complicated. Birthright citizenship, the border wall, border security, national security, the caravan. I mean, these issues are part of a larger problem that has to be cut up in pieces. It's not just one issue.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, new developments in the Russia probe, why the president's lawyers are bracing for a flurry of activity from Robert Mueller's team, and when. Plus, to expect to see more of President Trump as he gets set to hold nearly a dozen rallies in 6 days in the final stretch of the midterms. How much of his agenda is on the line as new polling gives us a peek into how Americans plan to vote.
I went to Illinois. You had to see a Boeing 747, this massive hangar, packed, and they had to use a second hangar for the overflow. Nobody's seen anything.
Yeah.
And always, look what happened for Ted Cruz, who's doing great now. We left Houston. He's now doing great.
I pledge allegiance.
And I'm getting 25 and 30,000 people to these rallies. Nobody's ever seen it. There has never been anything. This isn't bragging. There has never been anything like what's happening.
Well, we're told to get ready to see more of President Trump as he goes all out for the midterm election season. The president is hosting 11 rallies for GOP candidates across 8 states in the final stretch of the campaign. And when it comes to President Trump, a new poll from the nonpartisan PRRI shows a sharp partisan divide among those who prefer the Democrat candidate. Roughly equal numbers, 49 to 48%, say they are doing it in advance issues they care about, or that they are doing it to oppose President Trump and his agenda. Ditto for the GOP side, where those who prefer the Republican candidate are likely to say they are doing it to advance issues they care about, as they are saying that they are doing it to support President Trump and his agenda. Lawrence, what do you make of it?
Well, like I said, and Katie even alluded to this about the local races. Of course, this is going to be an indictment in some way on President Trump's agenda. But it's still going to go back to the candidates and their ability to connect with the voters. I do think sometimes we water down the president and his accomplishments. Part of the reason why President Obama was so not effective of getting other candidates elected is because he didn't spend a lot of time with other candidates when he was elected. He also didn't spend time with elected
He wasn't
members.
helpful to other Democrats?
Oh, come
really?
on! It was
He lost 1,000 seats.
when I was a
Which is historical for the
Democrat, they had problems with President Obama even going to Capitol Hill with meeting people of his own party. So there was not this involvement like you see President Trump. I think it can go either way just because these are local races to a certain extent. But as far as maintaining the Senate, I think the president is very helpful in that.
So this is where I wonder, Melissa, if those other topics and issues come into play rather than making it about the president or just making it about the president.
You mean you wonder which one's most effective, or you
yeah,
wonder?
just in terms of healthcare and the economy,
Yeah.
some of the things we've been talking about this hour. Because if there's a 50-50 split, roughly,
Right.
of I'm going to the polls to vote for the president and his agenda, and I'm going to the polls to vote against the president, if that's a 50, that leaves you
Yeah.
you a lot of ground to try to hit some issues.
So you got to go
See,
local.
that strikes me as one of those issues or one of those things that people would answer one way when they're being polled and do another thing when they get in the booth. Because I
We've
feel
seen
like,
a lot of that.
Yeah, when you get in the booth, I mean, I know myself, you're looking at the candidates that are right there. And I'm always thinking about what I've seen them do or not do in the community, and do I like the results of their policy? And maybe I'm different from other people. I'm not thinking about the rhetoric. I'm not thinking about the thing. I'm just thinking about, local races. Does my city feel safe? Does my city feel like it's improved? Are they spending more money than they ever have before? How do I feel about my tax bill? How do I feel about my children's opportunities in this race? And that's what I'm thinking about when I walk in and I vote for the mayor, for example. So I don't think it's different when you're looking at senator and representatives. Obviously, it's about, is that person going to support the president? But I think it's lower on the list.
Yeah. Is this one of the reasons, Adrian, that people say, oh, well, negative ads resonate better because they cut through everything and they get right to the things that are so local with each candidate? It's bad, but it might be true.
Right. Look, unfortunately, negative ads, if you're running in a competitive race, they are necessary. They just are. I mean, any candidate who's tried to only run
And you've worked with
on
candidates. How do you convince them of that?
You do, oftentimes the candidates who don't want to run, you can even call it more of a contrast ad as opposed to a negative ad, but they don't want to do. They want to keep everything positive, right? But I want to push back on something a little bit about this election only being a referendum on Trump. It's not, because you have to look at some of these special elections, the ones that we won, the Democrats won in Virginia, well, not Virginia, that was the governor's race, but in Alabama and New Jersey, some of these special elections, the two topics that voters have cited in the exit polls as to why they voted for the Democrats or why they even turned out in the election, number one is health care, number two is the economy. While the economy is doing well right now nationally, people are not always feeling that. They want to see their wages being raised. So those are the two issues. It has not been a referendum on Trump that the majority of voters, independents and swing voters,
isn't that way. It seems like the Democratic message is just anti-Trump.
It is.
It's
No,
not
it's
talking
not.
about those issues, and you definitely aren't running on the economy because none of you guys voted for the tax cut. So I understand the rhetoric that you're saying, but that's not being reflected in the campaign.
But Harris, to go back to your polling really quickly, people do care about issues, which is why if you watch what the president is saying at these rallies, he's very focused on those issues. He knows people care about health care, so he's been talking about how Democrats are going to nationalize their health care plan, make it more government run, how they're going to reduce the cost of health care, do more in Obamacare. So those are things that he's actually talking about, and in a lot of cases, he's a better communicator than the local candidate. So for example, in Montana, I've had a couple conversations.
He even says that.
I've had a couple conversations with people on the ground there, and they say, look, Matt Rosendale was dead in the water, but as soon as President Trump came in and they put some more resources into that race, he's actually got somewhat of a chance to take out John Tester.
What's fascinating about what you're saying is it isn't just the messenger, it's the message as well, and the ability to market that message. By the way, I'm still searching to see what the Republican plan is on health care overall.
Failed. And so
but Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader, has said that they might even revisit. The president is talking about it, as I call it, the stump for others. And so I'm curious to know what that's going to look like, because that easily could be a winning issue for them if they come up with
Well, they didn't want to just focus on repealing it, which has been the message by Republicans.
Well, they had to
stop
some of the bleeding of it,
All right. Well, with midterm election day just a week away, Can you believe that? Some top Democrats are already talking about using aggressive oversight to investigate President Trump if they take back the House. Whether that could turn off some voters who want legislation, not investigations. We'll talk about it. Stay close.
Well, some top Democrats vowing to aggressively investigate the Trump administration if they take control of the House this November. California Congressman Ted Lieu, a frequent Trump critic who sits on the House Judiciary Committee, with a preview of what we might expect. Watch.
If Democrats took back the House, we would be able to exercise oversight over the executive branch the way the framers intended. We would be able to get Donald Trump's tax returns to see if he's being influenced by foreign entities. We can call in the Secretary of Homeland Security, ask her why she still has hundreds of children that she has not reunited, that she ripped away from parents at the border.
And House Oversight Committee ranking Democrat Elijah Cummings telling The Hill earlier this month that he'd like to commit to look at what President Trump and congressional Republicans have done to, quote, tear down the foundations of our democracy. Cummings stands to be the chairman of the Oversight Committee if Democrats take back power. So, Adrian Elrod, Democrats really think that the main one issue they should be focusing on is getting President Trump's tax returns. Is that what the American people want them to focus on in Washington?
Look, I think the key line that Ted Lieu just made in that comment was exercising oversight. And I think that right now, when the entire House and Senate and the White House are governed by one party, we don't have that. So I do think Democrats need to be careful and not jump ahead of their skis.
But what does oversight mean exactly?
Yeah, it's not targeting your political opponent.
What does that mean?
Well,
Like, what are they
it means
interested in looking at outside of the president's personal tax returns?
Well, I know everyone's favorite topic, the potential Russian collusion. I think that's something that the committees will reopen and reinvestigate. But there are a lot of questions that, child separation at the border, some of the questions that have pushed the constitutionality by the Trump administration. I think that is something that Democrats will look at, and I think they should. But again, I think the American people want Democrats to get in there and focus on health care and the economy and the issues that matter to them. That's what voters are focusing on this election. And I think Democrats need to make sure that along with oversight, there's a balance of making sure that we are passing policies that the American people want.
I'm wondering if people have lost confidence in what can be actually gained in the hearings and the investigations, and the questioning that seems to never get an answer. But there's so much to the question. It's like, is this person going to get to the question ever in our lifetimes? Is this? I mean, we've seen so much of the navel gazing on Capitol Hill. I just wonder if the American public even trusts that it's transparent enough to give us enough answers to invest our time in. What is the return on investment? Or do we want a tackling of those issues that actually touch our everyday lives? It's sad to say, maybe certain things need to be looked into, but the preoccupation with investigating has not yielded the answers for people. And some of them are not over yet, and I get that. But I mean, the overarching idea of, are these people on Capitol Hill going to be transparent enough for me to even understand why I should care?
I couldn't agree with you more, because I feel this is something you and I have talked to each other about before when we've been sitting here and saying the problem is you get through the whole hearing, everybody's heard what they want, they think that they have the gotcha moment.
I heard it, but I heard this, you heard that.
Nothing happens.
There's no repercussions. Nothing happens afterwards, and the danger that you have is when you excite your voters saying, we're going to get in there with aggressive oversight, and finally all these wrongs, somebody's going to have to answer for them. Think of every hearing that they've had recently, or even back to Fast and Furious, other things. It seems like nobody is ever culpable for anything at the end of it.
But Lawrence, I want to get the final question to you.
Yeah.
People have warned that this is going to be a way, if the Democrats take the House, for them to bring the Trump agenda to a complete stop, not only by tying up the president with personal issues, but also subpoenaing the EPA, EPA officials, people at the Interior Department, and focusing all of the energy for the staff there on responding to congressional subpoenas from the House instead of focusing on an agenda and moving the government forward.
Potentially articles of impeachment. I think this is bad strategy from the Democrats. I mean, if you want Republicans to turn out to vote, start saying stuff like this. We're going to go investigate you. We're going to articles of impeachment, still talking about Russia, many of the stuff that's already been litigated. And so I think Democrats have a issue with the boy who cried wolf. They continue to tell their voters, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And now people aren't shocked anymore. I think this is bad strategy.
Look,
bad
Democrats
politics.
can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we can exercise oversight while also working to pass an agenda.
If you're a DACA recipient and you see that the road ahead is uncertain, and Democrats have particularly promised to help, although Republicans and this president have as well, but you've got Senator Chuck Schumer who promised to do so much, willing to shut the government down. So if they take the mantle back in any shape, fashion, or form on Capitol Hill, and you're that recipient, aren't you hopeful that those are the types of places where Democrats will put their issues? And I understand chewing gum, but they haven't been able to do all of that walking and talking at the same time, particularly on that issue up until now.
Look, people want a government that works for them, and I think Democrats will come to the table and will work on bipartisan solutions with Republicans.
Well, speaking of Russia, President Trump's legal team could allow the president to answer questions from special counsel Robert Mueller. How will he do it and when? That's next.
President Trump's legal team bracing for a flurry of activity from special counsel Robert Mueller after the midterms. Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, tells Fox News the draft answers for questions from Mueller's team are not complete, and there is no time to review them with the president before the midterms. Giuliani also says there are outstanding issues to resolve before written answers can be submitted, but hopefully an agreement can be reached. Here is the president telling Fox's Laura Ingraham about answering Mueller's questions.
I mean, it's ridiculous that I have to do anything because we didn't do anything. But we will probably do something, yes, where we'll respond to some questions.
In the meantime, a new poll by Public Religion Research Institute brings bad news for the special counsel. The poll gives Mueller a 39% approval rating and a 45% disapproval rating. There is a stark division along partisan lines, with only 17% of Republicans approving of the special counsel compared to more than half of Democrats. Katie, I find that funny, though, because I don't know that the public who's being polled on this necessarily knows what Robert Mueller is doing. They've been relatively tight-lipped. I don't know that Mueller cares what his popularity is.
He doesn't care, and that's why you've seen the special counsel very quiet. We haven't seen a ton of leaking from them, and the public statements they've made, they've said, be wary of what you're actually hearing. I think that this is a result of the long slog that we've seen with the Mueller investigation, and the more information that comes out about how this investigation got launched in the first place, and the evidence being that it was clearly very political, the FBI was involved, there's questions about FISA and all that kind of stuff. People start to think that, if they can investigate Donald Trump this way based on recommendations from the Clinton campaign and from Democrat operatives working in the FBI, essentially, then they can come after me too, and I'm not really all about that.
Adrian, I wonder if everybody who cares about this issue and is following it has pretty much made up their mind about what they think happened at this point.
Well, a couple things. First of all, it is hard, even for, I think, those of us who are doing television and who are reporters, to keep track of this every day, right? Because there's so many things that are changing by the day, and it gets confusing. So I think if you're the average person, maybe tuning into the nightly news, 3 times a week and seeing something, it's hard to keep track of what's actually going on. But furthermore, to what Katie's point said, Robert Mueller has not leaked a lot of information. It's been a very tight-lipped investigation. I still think you have a majority of the American people who want to understand what actually happened, and we'll see what he comes down with. And of course, we haven't heard a lot from him lately because the FBI, when somebody's under investigation, they tend to sort of cease in making any big news within 60 days of an election. That didn't happen with Hillary Clinton when James Comey reopened the investigation 12 days out. But typically, the FBI does not release any new information and sort of takes a couple steps back. And then that's why I think you're starting to see the Trump campaign, or rather the Trump administration, Giuliani, start to talk about what they plan to do after the midterms.
I would want to drill down a little bit more than I have already on the questions that were asked in this polling. And I wonder, too, if some of the disapproval is a function of not believing that the government can chew gum and walk at the same time, and might be otherwise focused more on one event or investigation or set of investigations more than people's own well-being and those other other issues, those kitchen table issues that they said were important or are important. So I think some of this, and I'd want to see if the question was asked, do you believe that this is a bad investigation? Do you believe that you shouldn't be spending money on it? I mean, those are fine questions that I think we normally would know, but I would also want to ask, do you think that this government can handle all of this plus meet your needs? No, that's why I don't approve of it. It's just a question that I would want to know if it got asked.
The country just rushed it out. I mean, it's been used as a political tool, even though I think Robert Mueller is trying to do a fair investigation, but I think the country is pretty much over it. There's also something to be said that there were also investigations in the House and Senate as well. What did Mueller what conclusion did he come to that the investigators didn't come to?
Okay. All right. Thank you. More Outnumbered in just a moment.